The year is 1501. The opulent halls of the Vatican are alight, but not with the solemn glow of prayer. Tonight, the Apostolic Palace hosts a different kind of ceremony. 50 courtesans dressed in silk and jewels dance provocatively before the assembled guests. Among them sit cardinals, nobles, and at the head of the table, his eyes glinting with anticipation, Pope Alexander VI, head of the Catholic Church. As the night deepens, chestnuts are scattered across the floor. The courtesans are instructed to crawl on all fours, picking up the nuts, competing for prizes that await the most enthusiastic among them. This was not a private indiscretion. This was the infamous Banquet of Chestnuts, a public display of unholy desires, said to be orchestrated by the Pope's own children, Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia. But why? Why would the spiritual leader of the Western world engage in such blatant depravity? Was it mere lust or a calculated display of power that defied the very foundations of his office? To understand this scandalous event, we must first immerse ourselves in the treacherous world of Renaissance Rome. The late 15th and early 16th centuries saw the papacy at its lowest ebb. Far from being purely spiritual leaders, popes had become powerful secular princes, commanding armies, forging alliances, and enriching their families. At the heart of this corruption was the Borgia family, led by Rodrigo Borgia, who ascended to the papacy as Pope Alexander VI in 1492. Alexander was a figure of immense charisma and ambition, but also of profound moral compromise. He openly acknowledged his illegitimate children, Cesare, Juan, Lucrezia, and Goffredo, showering them with wealth, titles, and power. His son Cesare, a ruthless and brilliant general, was the Pope's enforcer, carving out a Borgia duchy in central Italy through war and intimidation. His daughter Lucrezia, as we have discussed, was a beautiful and politically astute woman, married off multiple times to secure alliances. The Borgias were not subtle. They flaunted their power, their wealth, and their contempt for traditional morality. Their court was a hotbed of intrigue, poison, and open debauchery. And the Banquet of Chestnuts was, according to many historians, the pinnacle of this decadence. This was a night where sacred and profane collided, a historical event so shocking it has echoed through centuries. If you are fascinated by these hidden, often scandalous truths of history, stories that challenge our understanding of power, religion, and human nature, I invite you to subscribe to The Royal Archives. We delve into these forbidden chapters every single week. But the Banquet of Chestnuts was more than just an orgy. It was a carefully orchestrated message. The primary accounts of the Banquet of Chestnuts come from the diary of Johann Burchard, the Pope's master of ceremonies. Burchard, a meticulous record keeper, described the events of October 30th, 1501, with chilling detail. He recounted how, after a lavish dinner, 50 prostitutes were brought into the hall. They were initially naked, dancing among the guests. Then the Pope's children, Cesare and Lucrezia, oversaw the game. Candles were placed on the floor and chestnuts were scattered among them. The courtesans were ordered to collect them on all fours, amidst the laughter and applause of the Pope and his children. Prizes of silk cloaks and valuable rings were offered for the most successful and, crucially, the most public performances. But why? Why this blatant public display of vice by the head of the Church? This brings us to the core analysis. Theory 1. Pure decadence and lust. The simplest explanation is that Pope Alexander VI and his children were simply unbridled hedonists. They enjoyed the power to defy all moral conventions, to mock the very piety they were supposed to uphold. Their lust was their luxury, a visible sign of their absolute, unquestionable power. Theory 2. A calculated political statement. This theory suggests a deeper, more sinister motive. The Borgias were constantly fighting for legitimacy and dominance. By publicly engaging in such scandalous acts, the Pope was sending a message to his enemies. I am beyond your judgment. I can do anything I wish and no one can stop me. This banquet was not just for pleasure. It was a demonstration. It was a way to compromise and intimidate the cardinals and nobles present. They were forced to witness and implicitly sanction the Pope's depravity. In a world where reputation was everything, witnessing such an event made them complicit, binding them more closely to the Borgia family through shared sin. Theory 3. Historical exaggeration and slander. As with many stories of the Borgias, we must consider the source. Much of what we know comes from their enemies and later Protestant historians eager to paint the Catholic Church in a bad light. While Burchard's diary is considered reliable for factual accounts, the interpretation of motives can be biased. It's possible the event was exaggerated, or its details embellished over time to create a more sensational and damning narrative. However, even if exaggerated, the fact that such a story gained traction speaks volumes about the Borgias' reputation and the perceived moral climate of the Vatican. The Banquet of Chestnuts became a defining scandal of the Borgia papacy. It solidified their image as the epitome of corruption and unchecked power. But even for the Borgias, such a defiant display could not last forever. Pope Alexander VI continued his reign of power and pleasure for 2 more years. His son Cesare continued his ruthless military campaigns. However, in August 1503, fate intervened. Pope Alexander VI fell ill with a fever, possibly malaria, or as many of his enemies believed, poisoned. He died quickly. His death brought about the rapid collapse of the Borgia Empire. Cesare Borgia, now without his father's unwavering support, lost his military and political power. He was eventually arrested, exiled, and died fighting as a mercenary. Lucrezia Borgia, the beautiful and politically shrewd daughter, survived. She managed to distance herself from her family's infamy, settling in Ferrara, where she became a respected patron of the arts, trying to redeem her family name, or at least her own. The Vatican was cleansed, but the memory of the Borgias, and especially the Banquet of Chestnuts, lingered for centuries, a stark reminder of a time when the sacred was openly defiled by unholy desires. So, was the Banquet of Chestnuts merely a night of unbridled lust or a calculated political power play? Perhaps it was both, a shocking fusion of ambition and depravity that defined an era. The Borgias may have fallen, but their legacy of scandalous power lived on. Speaking of scandalous power, another powerful family, the de Medicis, would also rise to prominence in Italy, using wealth, influence, and strategic marriages to dominate Florence and even the French throne. To learn about their ruthless rise, click the video on your screen now.